Hi, this video is on the slide deck on data definition language. And the statements we're going to be looking at for the data definition are create, alter and drop. So create will allow us to create elements for our database system, create our database, create elements within our database. Alter will allow us to modify some of those elements, and drop then will allow you to drop the database or drop elements within the database. Excuse me. So starting off, you need to create a database. So to create a database, you use a create database statement. Now the alternative there is, so here with the syntax, you create and you either specify that you're creating a database or a schema. Schema is just another term for a database. It means it means your data definition really. So here you're creating a database or schema, which as I said means the same thing, and you give it the database name. It's optional then whether you put in if not exists. So basically, if the database exists, it won't create it if you include that clause if not exists. So example, create schema if not exists library. So this creates a new library database system with nothing in it, but you will have a database called library that you can then work with. Within the database then you need to create elements within it. So obviously we have relations, so we need to create structures for each of those relations, and those relations inside of an SQL database are tables. So we need create table statements. So create table, and again you have optional if not exists, and you give the table name. You then have round brackets, and within those round brackets then you specify your columns. You separate the columns by commas, except the last, right before the closing bracket, you don't have a comma. You can optionally then specify the engine type. The default is IN and ODB, which is what we want. So you can specify it if you want to, or you need, it's optional. So we'll examine the syntax. So first you specify the name of the table you wish to create after the create table clause. The table name again must be unique within the database. Secondly, you specify the list of columns for the table. Columns are separated by comma except the last one. Note that the column list section may hold a primary key or foreign key declaration also. So as well as having the columns within the table such as ISBN and title, etc., you can specify then primary key and foreign key if necessary. And thirdly then, as I said, you specify the storage engine for the table in the engine clause. If you don't explicitly declare it, the default is IN and ODB, which allows you to set up foreign keys, so that's the one we want. So this is a simple statement. So create table book. Here we have our round brackets, and within it then we have our columns separated by commas, and our last clause then is a primary key clause, and because that's our last clause, it doesn't have a comma. So here we have a table book. So the first column is ISBN. It's a variable character, size 15, and it's not null, which means it will not. It's expecting a value, so it won't accept null values. So not null. The next column then is title. Again, it's variable character up to size 50. Again, it's mandatory, so it's not null. Then we have publisher, variable character size 30. We do not have a not null clause on it, so that means that we will accept null values for publisher. Published date is a data type. Category, again, variable character size 30, and price then is a decimal size 5 with 2 decimal places. So that means then the maximum price of your book can be €999.99. So that means 5 digits in total, with 2 of those are decimal places. And then you explicitly specify here then the primary key, ISBN. So the primary key must be one of the columns from here, or combination. So here we have primary key ISBN. When you're setting up the table, you can also put primary key, especially if your primary key is only one out of the attributes. When you set up the attribute, like here, you could have ISBN varchar 15 not null primary key. So you could do it there as well. But I like to explicitly specify so that you can see it, especially for debugging purposes, what the primary key is explicitly. So to define a column for the table in the create table statement, you use the following syntax. So as you saw there, you have the column name, its data type. It's optional then whether you have a size. So going back to our example, for decimal, yes, we put in a size, but if it was integer, we wouldn't, or small int or tiny int, we wouldn't. For date, you don't specify a size. If these were texts, you wouldn't specify, or blobs, you wouldn't specify a size either. So we'll see that. as we go on. So it's optional whether you specify a size. It's then optional whether you put in not null or null. So the default is null. And you can also optionally specify a default value, okay, if you want to. And then it's also optional whether you specify whether your column is auto increment or not. Auto increment means that if you do not give the column a value, the system will automatically give it a value. And it'll start it at 1 if you don't specify. So you know, for the first record, you might give it a value, maybe 999, or we'll say, sorry, 200. Then the next record that goes in, if you don't give that column a value, well, then the next record will be 201. Okay, but you can leave it start at 1 if you want to. Okay. The components of the syntax above are: the column name specifies the name in the column, and again, that must be unique. Each column must always be associated with a specific data type, and the size is optional, and that depends on the data type. Not null or null indicates that the column accepts a null value or not, and null is the default. Default value is used to specify the default value for the column. So maybe for, you know, if it's you're inserting a setting up a student table, you might put in the default value for year is 1, because most students coming into the system to register first time will be first years. Auto increment indicates that the value of the column is increased by 1 whenever a new record is inserted into the table. So these are text data types. So you have char, varchar, and then tiny text, text, blob, medium blob, long text, and long blob. And as you can see, the maximum number of characters they go to. These are all fixed, the text and the blob. Varchar is variable. So if you specify that a variable character is size 30, well then it'll allow you to put up to 30 characters into your varchar. But if you only put in 5, well, then it'll only store 5 of those characters, so it is variable. These are fixed, so you don't specify a length on those. For our numeric values then, as you saw, we specified as a size for our decimal, and you can do that for double as well, but other fields then, you do not have to specify a particular size. So tiny int allows you to go from -28, and maximum value then is 127. If you specify that the field is unsigned, well then it doubles. It can go from 0 to 255. Small int then goes up to 32767, and again, if it's unsigned, it's doubled. Medium int then is larger int, and big int then are very large numbers. Then you can have a floating number, a double, and your decimal then, which you would use for for currency. So those are your numeric values. Date then, you can have date, and that is a fixed field, and it's in the format of year, month, and day. You can have date time, which is year, month, day, hours, minutes, and seconds. You can have a timestamp then that doesn't have any separators between the year, the month, and the day, etc. And then you can just have time on its own. So usually when people are using date, they usually either use date or date time. As we saw for the tables, your table will have a primary key. So if you want to specify, then you just use the syntax primary key. So as we saw earlier with the primary key, we had explicitly put down primary key, and then in brackets beside it write down the column. If you have a composite key, well then you just, inside the brackets, you'd have maybe, you know, if it was a combination of ISBN and title, you'd have ISBN, comma, title, and then close your brackets. Some tables then will have a foreign key, and to do that you explicitly state foreign keys. So here you can put in, optionally you can put in a constraint name on it, which is handy, because if it's, you know, if it's in the, we'll say the loan table or whatever, you can put in constraint loan student or something like that. So if when manipulating the data, some of your data violates the foreign key, you'll know then from the constraint which constraint it was. So here you have foreign key, you give the foreign key name, and that's optional if you want to give it a name or not. Then usually what we do is just foreign key, you specify the column, that's the foreign key. You reference then the parent table and the column within the parent table. And then you have the two clauses, on delete and on update. So on delete, cascade or no action or set null. Likewise with on update, cascade, delete or set null. And we have an example here. So in our book copy table, we have copy ID, which is the an integer, it's auto increment, and it's not null. So that means that if you don't give the copy ID a value, it will automatically increase by 1 from the previous value. So initially, if you give the book copy no value at all, it'll start off at 1, then the next copy will be 2, etc. The ISBN then, variable character size 15. The date acquired is a date field and it's not null, so you specify a value for the date acquired. And then the date destroyed again is a date field and you allow null values there. The table has a primary key and it's the copy ID, and then we have a constraint FK book, so that's a foreign key for book. The foreign key ISBN, so this column here is a foreign key and it references the ISBN within the book table. And then we've added on the 2 clauses on update cascade. So that what that means is if the ISBN value within the book table for any of the records change, well then they're automatically changed within the book copy table. So if the ISBN maybe, if you increase the size of it by 1 and you add on a 0 or whatever to that extra column or extra digit, this will automatically update in the book copy table. On delete no action means then that if you have copies of books in the book copy table that exist and the related ISBN then in the book table is deleted for some reason, well then if there's copies for that particular book, no action means you will not allow the deletion. So if I have ISBN 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and within the book copy table there is a copy ID, we'll say 15, and its ISBN is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If I go to delete from the book table the book with the ISBN 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the book copy table will not allow it because there's a copy of that book within the book the book copy table. So that's how you define your tables. We're going to look now at when you have the table set up, you might need to add in a new column or drop a column or change the data type of a column. And you mightn't do it initially, but as 6 months down the line or 2 years down the line, you'll see that column, that field size actually is not big enough. We need to change the size of it, or that column, we don't need it, you need to drop it. So alter table then allows us to modify the table. So in the first example here, this allows us to add a column. So alter table, whatever the table is, and you add a column and you specify its data type and optionally specify the size, etc. If you want to get rid of a column, then you say alter table, again the name of the table, and you drop the column and the name of the column. So maybe alter table book, drop column published date or whatever. To change a column then, there's 2 different ways of doing it. The first one allows you to change the column and change its name also. So here, alter the table, change the column old column name to new column name, and if you want to specify a different data type, you can specify that also. Or if you're just changing the data type, then you can say alter table, the name of the table, modify the column, and you just specify the column you want to change, and you then put in your new data type. So that allows you to change the structure of your elements as you work with your database. And lastly then, if you want to drop the database, and you can do this a lot when you're debugging, because when you're writing up your create table statements, you usually have them in a script and you execute them. So if something goes wrong, you can drop it and start again, essentially. So here, to drop a database, you can either say drop database with the database name or drop schema and the database name. So drop schema if exists library. So if the library database exists, you want to drop it. And then individually within the database, if you want to just drop a table, you can just say drop table name. The only time you'll run into trouble with this is if it's a parent table and has related foreign key values. So if that's the case, what you have to do is you need to drop the related table first and then drop the parent table. If you don't want to drop the related table, well then you have to you'd have to reconsider your option, or if you really want to get rid of the table, well then you'd need to get rid of the foreign key link first, and then drop the table. And you can do that by altering the table and doing your drop column on that. Okay, so that's data definition. So in the next slide then we'll look at an example. Thank you.